Two. Hello, everyone. What's going on? This is Jordan Connect here live with the Bob Burg on today's episode of Embrace the Chase. For those of you that have no idea who Bob is an author and international speaker. He speaks for corporations, international associations, Fortune 500 companies, and so much more. He regularly, addresses audiences from about 50 to 16,000, and he's shared the stage with Olympic athletes, former political leaders, as well as a U.S. president. But throughout the years, he's been most known for his book, Endless Referrals. But most recently, he's been known for his book, The Go-Giver, which he co-authored, by the way, with John David Mann. And The Go-Giver has been a Wall Street Journal and Business Week bestseller and has sold over 500,000 copies. And all of Bob's books together have sold well over 1 million copies, which is really cool. And he's also, the American Management Association has named Bob one of the top 30 leaders in business, as well as the top 200 most influential authors in the world by Richtopia. Super excited to have Bob on with us today, and we are just going to do our best to pick his brain and hopefully learn something really cool today. So thank you for coming on, Bob.
Oh, my pleasure, Jordan. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Would you mind sharing just a little bit more about yourself for us, for those that have no idea who you are, other than the fact that you're an incredible author?
Well, thank you. You said it pretty much in your introduction. It was a very nice introduction. Thank you. My background was first in television and radio broadcasting, and then in sales. And I began to really learn all I could about sales and had a successful selling career, and eventually began sharing with others what was working for me. And really it was because any successes I've had, and I've had plenty of failures too, believe me, but any successes I've had have been the result of learning from others who came before me. I'm an avid reader, an avid learner, and I believe in applying what we've learned and continuing to just kind of fight the fight and do what we need to do. So that really is pretty much it. You now pretty much know everything about me you need to know or even wanted to.
I love it. And I love the backdrop behind you, all those books. So question for you, and I know this may be a hard one. What's your favorite book that you've ever read? Or if you don't like that question, what would be your top 5 most influential books in your life?
No, it's a good question. I would say it depends on when I read it and what I was looking to get from that book, because, most of my books and that the background in front of the library behind me is one very, very small section of my home library. I'm a book person. I mean, I just love reading. I love I love the fact that you can learn from other people's wisdom and from their experiences and so forth. Books on history, or you can learn so much from that. How-to books and inspirational books. And so it really kind of depends. Probably my favorite book, I guess, if there was one book that I would say would prepare anyone for understanding how life works, understanding human nature, was written by Harry Browne, Browne. It's a book few people have ever heard of. It's called How to Sell Anything. It's called The Secret to Selling Anything. And he wrote this back actually in the 60s and never published it. It only got published about 7 or 8 years ago, and this was after he passed away. It was from 2 very brief manuscripts that he wrote in the 60s. And one was on human nature, and the other was on applying human nature to selling. And one of the fantastic things about Harry, and I got to know him very briefly in the early 2000s when I was helping him on a political campaign. And Harry was a numerous New York Times bestseller. He wrote books on economics, on philosophy, on politics. And but this one he never, I guess he just wrote it back in the 60s and never just did anything with it. And his widow, Pamela, found it on the hard drive after he had passed. Unfortunately, she got into the hands of an independent publisher. But Harry was a very unique person. I don't think he ever raised his voice in his life. He was a very gentle, very kind man. He really understood human nature. He understood why people did things they did, and he didn't try to change human nature. He understood it, respected it, and worked within it. And because of that, people always felt respected by Harry. And the secret to selling that he talks about, he says exactly what it is in the book. The secret to selling anything is to simply find out what the other person wants and help them to get it. And if your product or service will help them to get it, the sale is going to happen. If not, you shouldn't be selling it to that person anyway. And so just a wonderful man. I wrote a blog on his book at the Burg, burg.com/blog site. If you search The Secret of Selling or The Secret to Selling, or just put his name, Harry Browne, Browne, in there. It is such an exquisite book. Now, remember, it was written in the 60s, so there's kind of not sexist language because he wasn't a sexist, but written in that style, his as opposed to his or hers. And the roles were Leave It to Beaver type, male and female. So if you read that, please don't be offended by that. I knew Harry. He was not in any way a sexist. That was just the language of the day, unfortunately. But the book itself, absolutely, if it was that, what's one book, if you had to have it, that would best prepare you for living a successful and happy life, that would be the book.
I'm going to have to check that out. That sounds really good. A portion of what you're saying there reminds me of Zig Ziglar's book.
Oh, well, Zig, the best. And when Zig said, you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. And that actually is the quote. That's one of those quotes that few people ever actually quote it correctly. And it's a personal bugaboo of mine because quoted correctly. It's a magnificent quote.
I agree with you. It's really, really good. Well, now I'm curious, since you've been talking about all this, what got you into becoming a speaker or becoming an author?
Well, the speaker part was actually quite natural because once I was starting to be asked to share what was working for me and my sales team from other companies on an informal basis. It kind of was a quick morph into once I understood and that you could speak on topics such as sales, marketing, and persuasion and communication and so forth. That was great. But the reason I wrote my first book, which was Endless Referrals, this was back in the early, mid-90s, 94, I think it came up for the first edition. That was just because my friends in the National Speakers Association told me that if I really wanted to take my career to the next level, help position myself better, get higher fees, be more bookable, that I needed to write a book. So the first book was simply for utilitarian purposes. I didn't really have this desire to write a book. So that's why I did that one. As I've grown and as the years have gone on and I felt the need to kind of communicate more information, I've moved more from a speaker who writes to a person who writes because he has something to say or feels he has something to say. Whether I do or not, that's up to the marketplace. And so forth.
That's awesome. I love it. I think I'm getting some feedback there. On this down. One of the best ones I've ever read was The Art of Persuasion. So I'm just curious. What led you to writing that book? Whether it's just natural or
well, I really see persuasion as a positive because influencing another person, and to influence on a very basic level, influence is simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal, okay? You can influence, you can move a person to action one of two ways. You could manipulate them, which is, I think, a very negative thing. It means you're using force or you're using compliance, you're using trickery. That's manipulation. It's dishonest. It's not. Or you can persuade. To persuade means you are very gently and in a way that benefits that other person, helping them take the correct action. Manipulation is win-lose in nature. Persuasion is win-win in nature. And so I've always been fascinated by that. Now, I got to grow up watching, to me, the best persuader or influencer I've ever met, and that's my dad, who just had and still has to this day such just a kind and wonderful way about him of making other people just feel genuinely good about themselves. And I believe, and we're talking really about people skills. And in my opinion, the single greatest people skill, the greatest people skill is simply a highly developed and authentic interest in the other person. And that's something my dad has always had. And people understood that and they knew that. And so when you genuinely have that interest in that other person, they feel good about you. They begin to know you, to like you, to trust you. And as you've probably read in any of the books of mine that have been out, the golden rule of pretty much life is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to and allow themselves to be led and influenced by those people they know, like, and trust. So I see influence and persuasion as being that sort of separator between the unsuccessful and the successful and the ultra successful. Those with people skills, genuine, authentic people skills, but really they're 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
That's so true. What's the story of it? What led to you writing your partnership co-author?
Yeah. It's interesting because that one is a business parable. Back in the mid-90s, we were talking about, I had my first book published, Endless Referrals, which was a how-to book. And it was really on how people in sales who maybe were not comfortable with the process of building relationships with people, how they could do this in a way that was, you didn't have to be defensive, you didn't have to make the other person defensive, you could do it in a way that was very natural and that was other focused. Okay, so when you take your eyes off yourself and you place it on others, it's a lot easier to create relationships with people. People feel good about you, right? And so again, it was a how-to book. But throughout the years, I've read many business parables, and I've always loved them. And I mean, I'm talking about starting with Og Mandino's Greatest Salesman in the World and several of his other parables, to Klassen's Richest Man in Babylon, to in the early 80s, the 1 Minute series by Drs. Blanchard and Johnson, and people from Chris Widener to Robin Sharma to, there's been so many fantastic parables. And they tell a story, and it's easy to connect with them and feel good about them and learn something. So I thought, what if we could take the basic idea, the basic premise of Endless Referrals, the know, like, and trust and the whole thing, and move that put that into the form of a business parable. So, I first just asked myself the question, so how do you develop those know, like, and trust relationships? Basically, you're always giving. You're giving value to everyone you meet whenever you possibly can. You're trying to give value to others and help them in the way they feel it's of value. So, I had the idea, the title, The Go-Giver, and a very, very sketchy kind of outline, right? It was nothing. It really wasn't. And I also knew that I could write a how-to book. That's, you just write down what you know and have good editors. There's a big difference between a how-to book and trying to write a work of fiction, a parable, which The Go-Giver would be. And fortunately, I knew a guy by the name of John David Mann. I had never actually met him, but he was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I used to write for. And he was just such a fantastic editor and writer, and he was known very well within a very small niche, but those who knew him, we knew how brilliant he was. And so I asked him, and when I say ask, I mean pleaded with him to be the lead writer and the storyteller of The Go-Giver. So he really did the heavy lifting, and he's just fantastic. So we've now written, together The Go-Giver. The follow-up to that was Go-Giver Sell More, which is more the application. Then we wrote The Go-Giver Leader, and now we have another book coming out next year called The Go-Giver Influencer, the next book in the Go-Giver Parable series. So it's been a great partnership, because the guy is not only brilliant, but he's just humble and kind and very easy to work with. So it's really a blessing.
That's awesome. I love that. In your own words, kind of 5 laws of stratosphere success.
Yeah, the laws themselves are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. The law of value says your true worth in the business sense is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment, which doesn't mean you don't make a profit. When you're a go-giver, you make a great profit. What it means is your focus is on creating such an immense, wonderful, fantastic customer experience that they feel so great about it, they know they receive much more in value or use value than what they paid for. While, of course, you make a very healthy profit. It would be one of the examples was Ernesto, the restaurateur in the story, who had a very swanky restaurant among his other holdings. But when you went in there, you paid a pretty penny for the meal. It was a high-end restaurant, but you were treated so well, and the food was so great, and the presentation so wonderful, and the ambience so fantastic, and everything about it was just so magnificent. You came away, you may have paid $100, $150, $200 for the meal, but you came away feeling like 1,000, feeling like $1 million. And so, but of course, the cost of goods sold and the upkeep of the restaurant paying was, of course, less to Ernesto than what he charged. So he made an excellent profit per meal. So that's what the law of value is all about. It means you're so focused on the customer experience that the other person just feels great about it. This is why we say, by the way, that money is simply an echo of value. It's the thunder to value's lightning, which means nothing more than that the value comes first. That's got to be the focus. The value comes first. The money you receive is simply a very natural and direct result of the value you've provided. Law number 2, the law of compensation, says that your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So where law number 1 says to give more in value than you take in payment, law number 2 tells us that the more people whose lives you touch with the exceptional value you provide, the more money with which you'll be rewarded. This is the lesson that Nicole, the CEO, taught Joe, the protege, that law number 1 represents your potential income, but it's not enough to just provide exceptional value to one person or a few people. Law number 2 represents your actual income. This is a matter of how many lives you impact with that exceptional value. Law number 3, the law of influence, says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first, which does not mean that you're a doormat or that you're a martyr or that you're self-sacrificial. Absolutely not at all. It just means that you understand that, again, the all things being equal, people will do business with, refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those feelings toward you and others than by genuinely and authentically moving from, again, what we call an I focus or me focus to an other focus. Or as Sam, one of the mentors in the story, advised Joe, making sure that your win is all about the other person's win. And when you do that, you'll have created an absolute army of personal walking ambassadors. Law number 4 is the law of authenticity. This says the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. In the story, Deborah, one of the mentors, shared a very important lesson, and that is all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they are all very important, they're all for naught if you don't come at it from your true authentic core. But when you do, okay, when everything you say is congruent, right, with what you do, people feel good about you. People they trust you. They know you. They like you. They trust you, right? They feel very safe with you. They're much more likely to want to be in relationship with you and refer you to others. So we simply need to understand what our core authentic strengths are and lead with those strengths. And law number 5 is the law of receptivity. And this one says that the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. It's really nothing more than that understanding that we breathe out and we breathe in. It's not one or the other. we breathe out carbon dioxide, we breathe in oxygen. We breathe out, which is giving, we breathe in, which is receiving. And despite the messages we get from so much of the world around us, giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. They're simply two sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem. In other words, it's not a matter of are you a giver or a receiver. That's what we call the treacherous dichotomy or the false dilemma, right? The unnecessary use of the word or. No, you are a giver and a receiver. But your focus is on the giving because you understand that's a universal law. The giving comes first. We sow before we reap. And that's just how it is. And when you've done this, and when you've focused on the giving, when you've focused on giving value to others, again, in a way that they understand it to be of value, because value is always in the eyes of the beholder, right? And so that's why we have to focus on them, not what we think would make us happy, but what would make them happy. And we only know that through asking questions, which is what selling is, right? It's discovering what the other person wants, needs, and desires. And as Harry Brown said, helping them to get it. And when we do that, we have earned the right, not the entitlement, but the right to receive. We simply have to allow ourselves to do so. And when we do allow that, we will live in prosperity.
That's awesome.
Those are awesome. Those are really
go back like 7 times. But question for you then, Bob. What do you see as your legacy for not only your entire life, what exactly do you want people to remember you as?
I think in a sense, I'm trying to carry on what I consider to be my dad's legacy. And that is, just helping people feel genuinely good about themselves, encouraging, helping people be their best, and again, helping them attain happiness, helping them to. I think it always goes back to how we feel about ourselves, and we do that through focusing on others. And again, I just want to make sure that people know that there's nothing self-sacrificial about that. Absolutely not. We should what's going to bring us happiness is when we act congruently with our values.
I love it. Do you have any advice the up-and-coming generation, young people, or even people of any age that are interested in starting businesses or just struggling in general sales?
Well, first, let me recommend getting Harry's book. Okay, the Secret of Selling Anything, the one we were talking about before, because that book, to me, anyone and everyone, if they read that book, that's a starting point for happiness and success in life. Okay, and then I would say whatever you decide you want to do, whatever you determine is your overriding desire. Learn how to do it. I mean, people have done it before you. Pretty much anything that you want to do has already been done by someone, and they've documented how to do it, either through a book, through audios, through videos on the internet. And so, in other words, learn the system, right? What is a system? I define a system as simply the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. The key is predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, then all you need to do is A, and you'll get the desired results of B. But two things have to happen. One, which is the next step after seeking out and finding the system, is apply the information immediately. And I don't mean before, you should, but I mean once you've got enough information to begin, you don't need to be perfect to begin. In fact, if you wait till you're perfect to begin, you're never going to begin. Zig Ziglar himself said, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you learn how to do it well. And of course, Zig, he was certainly not saying to go out and do something in a shoddy way. He was just saying that once you know enough to start, get going. Start, get out there, get going, do it. You'll fail, you'll course correct, you'll fail some more, you'll course correct, you'll get better and better, right? So start immediately. And then third is be persistent. understand that hearing no and getting no's and failing is just part of the journey to success, and which doesn't mean it has to be fun. I mean, it's not fun being told no, and I don't care how you frame it. It's not fun, but it is part of it. And some great friends of mine, Andrea Waltz and Richard Fenton, a husband and wife team, wrote a magnificent book, a business parable called Go for No. And it's such a great book. Yeah. And I love their premise. And that is, yes is the destination. No is how you get there. And again, it doesn't mean you have to enjoy being told no or enjoy failing. I don't think any of us do. Why would we enjoy it? But as long as we understand going in that that's a part of it, we can sort of inoculate ourselves against it. And when it happens, we say, okay, it wasn't fun, but that's part of it. Moving on. Okay. And then just having the belief in what you're doing and in yourself and what the value you're bringing, to the world. Those people who solve problems and add value to others, solve problems for, add value to others. Those are the people who always have a job and always have a business if that's what they want.
Thanks so much, Bob, for that response. I have one last question before the rest of things. Is there anything that's just on your heart today that you want to share with people?
I think more than anything else, it's just, again, being willing to move your focus from yourself onto others, not in a self-sacrificial way, but in a way that you really feel as though you're helping someone else. And the more we help others, the more we help ourselves. And again, it's not why you do it, it's just the result. And if we can do that, then we're always heading in the right direction.
I love it. Thank you so much, Bob, for being on. Everyone watch, or you're watching a replay, make sure you go follow Bob at all the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the above, and go buy. I'm going to link several books. The top 10 I think I'd already put in there on their Amazon links as well as his website. So go check that out. Bob also has a certification program to be able to teach the knowledge that he's passed on. Give that a check, a look as well. Is what I'm trying to say. Thank you, Bob, so much for being on. I really appreciate it. And you have a great day, sir.
Thank you, Jordan. You too. Appreciate you.
Thanks.